guys, how are you? And welcome back. This is a new episode of Evil Lives Here. I think I might be getting back into the swing of things, but don't hold that against me because, you know, life. Anyways, I am going to sit here and we're going to talk while I do some makeup. So, for those of you that are new, hello, my name is Erin. This is Ageless Beauty with Erin. I do two different types of series. One is a basic get ready with me. We sit, we talk. I usually have someplace to be, something I'm doing. I don't know, just a number of things that I'm doing, or I'm doing a certain look. I'm trying new products. I do a lot of let's try it out and see how it works. I actually have a series that I'm working on now like that. So that is what my get ready with me is. I could be doing something and need a certain look, and voila. Now, my Evil Lives Here series, a little different. Evil Lives Here is a show on the Discovery Channel or the ID network. I'm not really sure anymore what it's called. I probably should find out as I sit and talk about the show, right? But yeah, they have this show called Evil Lives Here, and I watch it, take some notes, which are over here, so my eyeballs tend to go over here. And then I'll sit and do some makeup while we discuss it. The makeup literally is only to keep me busy as we discuss this. I usually have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. I have an app. It's a Choose For Me app that I sit down and kind of do a makeup roulette, as I like to call it, and let it pick what I'm using. So it keeps me kind of focused, because the stuff I get probably would never wear together in a lot of cases, and other cases it's not. And I can tell you the story. So that's what we're doing today. As always, while I'm doing an Evil Lives Here, I do not discuss the makeup. I might make little comments here and there depending on what I'm seeing, because, like I said, I'm concentrating on doing a good look. But I don't talk about the products. Like, you won't see me say, and this product is, that's a get ready with me. We're talking more products. We're talking more things like that. But everything I use will be listed in the comments section. So if you have any questions or you want to know more about a product, let me know. Also, check out my ambassador codes below. They got some links and some codes for some discounts. Check that out. Use my code, whichever one you go to. There are 3 different ambassador codes. There are one for One Up Nutrition, one for madrabbit.com, and another one for Just Strong. So check those out. Use those codes. Get yourself a discount. All right. So now let's talk about one of those codes. Hi guys, quickly jumping in to discuss Mad Rabbit Tattoo with you. Now, I was out today and I decided I would look while I was at Walmart and see what the prices were for Mad Rabbit there versus what is online. And guys, it's the same. There's pennies difference in some cases. So, are you saving anything? Are you using your discount? No. I will state, when you order online, there could be free shipping. So double check that. Get online, find your products, protect your beautiful ink, and use my code. Get 20% off. If you get free shipping, 20% off. That's more than pennies. I go to Walmart and buy something for $11.98 or something for $12 on the website, but get 20% off that? Check it out. Go see madrabbit.com. Use my promo code ERIN20, ERIN20 for 20% off, and check for that free shipping. I bet you can get it. Hope you guys enjoy it. Let me know what you think and if you have any questions. And now back to the show. All right, welcome back. Okay, on to the show. And today we are doing season 2, all wrong. We're doing season 4, episode 2, titled Into the Lion's Cage. Originally aired August of 2018. So, it started a little weirder than normal, and typically in all of these shows they start the same way. Someone comes in, they're sitting down, they're getting mic'd up and ready to talk. In this case, and I'm going to say it's very aesthetically pleasing, there is an older lady standing at the ocean. Like, you see the water behind her, beautiful sand, and I know it's got a name. I don't know because I don't live at the ocean, unfortunately. But that grass that has the sand that comes through it, people walk through trails and stuff. I mean, just beautiful. She's standing there. Her back is facing us. I don't see her face. She's in white pants, which I think is just an amazing contrast against the blues and the browns of the sand. And a beautiful blue shirt. And it is just captivating. Beautiful. I mean, I know we're here for something tragic, but they start this show out very aesthetically pleasing. I can't even say that enough. It was nice. It was good. So, and it starts with her, this lady, saying a prayer. Now, I'm not going to quote the prayer that she said. I'm not even sure I paid a whole lot of attention to it, though, myself. But in the prayer, she ends it, what's it say? She prays for healing, etc., etc., for what was done by the evil of Jimmy. So we don't know her name, but we know Jimmy is the bad guy. So now we're coming in, and the same lady is sitting down and being mic'd up. And we're going to hear from her. And to see. Pop-up comes up, because if you have never watched Evil Lives Here, I do mention this a lot, so let me explain it. Evil Lives Here has these little pop-ups with information throughout the shows. So it'll tell you something, or, you know, just a little bit here and there about what's going on. And in this case, it tells us that it has been more than 20 years since Terry Jo, who is this lady in the white and blue that's going to be talking, Terry Jo Howard last saw James Randall. Okay, Jimmy is James Randall. Terry Jo is this lady that was in the beach, or at the beach in the white and blue, saying the prayer. Okay. She starts the episode holding a bunch of papers, and it doesn't really tell us what they are or even show us, which is weird, because normally if there's paperwork of any kind, they pretty much usually show us what it is. But in this case, I'm not sure what it is. But she's holding papers, and it could be something just to occupy your hands, kind of like me doing makeup as we're talking. So she says that she thought Jimmy was a good man. She says, that she did not know the depths of the evil that was inside him. That she says, and it's a very good point here, she says it's hard to explain evil. I guess each one of us could be a little bit different. I mean, I know there's the basic do's and don'ts in life that make you evil, but some things could be, you know. But she says, so she can't explain evil, and I absolutely love what she says here. But when you've touched it, let it touch you. Even slept with it in your bed, and you find out that that is what is evil, it affects you in more ways than you could possibly imagine. And I thought, that's actually a very, very good way to put things. I mean, it'll affect you different if I'm seeing it like I am on a show, secondhand knowledge, than the one living with it. Does that make sense? Okay. And then I honestly wasn't expecting someone else to sit down. For some reason, I thought Terry Jo was going to be the only person in this episode, and she's not. Now we have a second lady that's sitting down and being mic'd up, and she says that she's never talked about what James has done to her, I guess. But it was time to tell her story from start to finish. Her name is Linda Whitmere. And this will be the first time she's talking about James Randall. So, we don't know yet if Terry Jo, or Linda know each other, or if they're just, victims of the same person. We don't know. Sometimes it's family members. Sometimes you have strangers. Sometimes, there's a lot of things. And Evil Lives Here will eventually tell us. I think, it'll eventually tell us. But, like I said, I wasn't really expecting another person to sit down. I don't know why. It's not the first time, nor probably will be the last time, that Evil Lives Here will use multiple people to tell a story. Now, I don't think, and don't quote, I'm say that a lot today, that I've seen more than two people talking. I don't think I've seen it where they've done more than one person telling the story. But, again, and this is only season 4, so later seasons, because I think I saw there's actually 17 seasons of this show. I was thinking it was only like 13 or 14, but I don't know. Anyway, so Evil Lives Here tells us that Linda and Terry Jo, again, when I say Evil Lives Here, it's a pop-up that comes up, shared their bed with Evil. Okay. And in a quick montage that I've never done before, but I found kind of cool, they show both women talking at different types. So it flipped to Terry, it flipped to Linda, back and forth, as they're saying things. And they're all talking about the abuse that they suffered from James. And they're all telling their own stories, different instances, which I'm not going to really break down because it will get into as the stories goes. But it just keeps going back and forth. One woman says this, another woman says that. And it's a really cool little montage. They did a little something different there. But they both tell in this montage saying they thought James was going to kill them. So now, after the introduction of the show, and you guys know it's killing me not to say more, Linda is who's going to talk first, and she's telling us how she met James. And she says her and a friend of hers were at a local bar. She told us the name. It was like Buttercup, or I don't know. It was kind of cute, kind of, I'd never heard a bar named such, but hey. I don't know yet where they live, where they're at, if it's like a country or thing or not. I don't know. Anyways, so, and I don't yet know what time period anything is. I will say Terry gives more detail with time. So anyway, she's at the bar with her friends. It's like a day or two after Valentine's Day. And she says when she met him, she thought he was very handsome. He was very polite. Just, kind of had that vibe about him that you trust immediately. He asked her to dance. They danced and exchanged phone numbers and then started calling each other and talking regularly. And then progressively it started dating. Now, she did not tell us how fast everything happened. So I don't know, in one story I recently did, it was like 6 weeks, something like that. Later, they're moving in together. She doesn't say. She does say, and again, my stomach dropped out of my belly, that she was a single mother to Craig. They don't give kids names. I hate that she gave a kid's name. That just makes me think something's going to happen to poor Craig. Okay, so she's a single mother, and she has a son named Craig. And she says that James, and she calls him James most, Terry Jo calls him Jimmy, so it's kind of a back and forth thing that I will be doing. But obviously, Jim, James, Jimmy, we're all the same person. She says James was a very good dad to Craig. Nice guy, treated him well. I mean, oh, Jimmy's out here clicking all the check marks for Linda, right? And they get married. And she is showing us a picture of them on their wedding day. So, I lied. Linda tells us a date. They got married June 9th, 1979. I don't know how old they are. I mean, I would think 20-ish, so they would have been about 20, in that range when they got married. Okay, so, and she's showing us this photo, and she says, when I look at this photo, I see a happy couple in love. And she's talking about the wedding, how happy she was, and she said it was a very small wedding. Do you hear my daughter's cat in there? Yeah, I've never had to deal with that before. If it doesn't get better, I'm going to have to go find out. So anyways, she's talking about this wedding, and it's a very small wedding, just family, basically, a few friends. And she said, as she's, I think, walking down the aisle, and I want to tell you, I don't know. This whole story here kind of bothers me. It is a little foreshadowing. But I don't know. Okay. Anyways, she's walking down the aisle, and she sees her sister sitting in the, I started to say stands. She's sitting in the stands cheering me on. She's sitting in the aisles, you know. And she said her sister's just crying. Just bawling, right? And she's like, oh my gosh, she's so happy for me. She's crying. I'm like, okay. Of course, she's, you know, walking down the aisle. It's not like she's going to stop and find out what's going on. So I get the fact that she's, you know, sister's sitting in the pews at the church and just crying. And I guess, in all fairness, depending on how close you are to a sibling, it might not be very odd to consider the fact that she might have been so happy that she was crying for her. But then Linda tells us that at the reception, her sister's still crying, just bawling, and can't seem to get herself under control, whatever. And she said, I went over there to ask her, said, you know, what's wrong? What's going on? And of course, her sister was telling her she was fine. Everything's good. She's just, you know, so happy. So happy. So Linda says, you know, I thought it was weird, but she's telling me that she's just happy for me, and that's why she's crying. Linda says, later, I found out that her sister told her later, in like many years later, that Jim had actually sexually assaulted her sister before they got married. Now, this is where I have a little bit of a problem, because what? I am not taking anything away from this lady's trauma, being sexually assaulted by your future brother-in-law and knowing that you'll have to see him often and, you know, whatever. I'm not taking anything away. And she probably did what she thought was right. So she said that she didn't tell Linda because she was afraid Linda wouldn't believe her. But And this is where I'm like trying to wrap my head around it. And this is just me. We're all different, okay? I get this. I truly 100% get this. But they're getting married. Your sister is marrying this man that has sexually assaulted you and you're not saying anything. I would have been running to tell her, hey, halt, stop. You cannot get married. If she doesn't listen, I'd have to say that's kind of on her. But at the same time, I don't think I could live with myself watching my sibling get married to somebody that had assaulted me without saying something. I mean, no offense. I really do not. And I'm sure that probably will not make some of you happy, and I apologize. But I'm just, why are you not saying something? I'm so confused why you didn't say anything. And anyways, she says her sister told her that she was just afraid that Linda wouldn't believe her. And then, you know, of course, I have to wonder how close they were. And I don't know how long after they were married that the sister told her. She might not have said anything for a very, very long time. I mean, she looked young too. I don't know. She might have been around the same age. It never says if she was an older sister or younger sister, whatever. Anyways, apparently James had a, what did she call it? Oh, he would go fishing up in this little fishing hole near where her sister lived. So he would go fishing and then go see the sister. Jerk. Jerk's not even a nice enough word. This dude is evil. So now Linda says, you know, they got married. And then they soon had a baby girl. And then they had a baby boy. So we know Linda has Craig. And now she's got a boy and a girl, which they never tell us their names. Again, does not make my tummy happy. Does not make me happy. So, okay. Now Linda is telling us that, you know, life was pretty good. You know, they had a normal, about normal everything, including a sex life. And prior to her saying that she had a normal sex life, Evil Lives Here had popped up and said that James had started acting strange in bed. So, they have everything normal, right? Normal sex life, normal life. She's not thinking anything's weird. And she then tells us the story of one night they're in their room and making out and doing what married couples do, or what any couple does. And he starts choking her. Like, out of the blue, she was not expecting this at all. And he had never done anything like that before. Never even indicated that he was into something like that. And she said she was terrified. Like, where did this come from? What's going on? Why? You know, whatever. So she said she got mad. So she got past being scared, she got mad. And she kicked him off of her. And she said he was just like very apologetic. He would never do it again. Etc., etc. She told him that it was not okay. She didn't like it. So, you know, she accepted his apology. Life moved on. She forgot about it. She didn't think about it. And I'm thinking that this is probably coming up again. This is not going to be something that... Again, I don't know anything about this story as I'm making my notes. I do now. I didn't then. And I have on here, I have wrote, yes, I have that quizzical look on my face. Because if I was a betting person, I would say this is going to happen again. That's just me. And I was right. So her next words were that Jim became more aggressive in bed, and he started more and more choking. I thought I had all my brushes. And he didn't do it every time, but it was becoming more and more frequent. And she realized that if she didn't fight him, it hurt less. And then she says she never told anybody about what Jim was doing to her in the bed. So she's dealing with this. Not every time, but it's becoming more and more frequent. She's scared. She's not talking to anybody about it. She says that she was in love with him, but she knew his behavior was not normal. And she tells us that because of her fear of him choking her, she never wanted to have sex with him. Like their sex life was no longer okay and happy. She said it was just beginning to become like a lot of time in between it. You know, that type of thing, right? She was scared of him. He was only acting this way when he was having sex. So she said there'd be big periods of time, big stretches of time. And this man, I have just this feeling, we're watching an episode of Evil Lives Here, that he is probably not going to be okay with this. And very well start looking for other women. Okay, so then Evil Lives Here tells us that Jimmy starts disappearing at nights. And then Linda comes back and she's telling us that Jimmy would go out to the bar with his buddies. This was something pretty normal. She didn't think anything of it, right? But he would always come home at a decent hour. And when the bars were closed, or when the bars were closing, he would come home. And then the first night that he didn't, she became concerned. So he stayed out a lot later than normal. She said before it would be about 10 o'clock or so. But she said she was up watching TV and he still wasn't home. So she was worried. Did he get into a wreck? This is before cell phones. So, it's good. I get the fact that she's probably worried and stayed up and waited for him. I still stay up and wait for my husband and daughter when they're out late, And I have cell phones. Life now gives us things like, what is that called? Go 360 or location services or things that we can track people with. Back then, not so much. So she was concerned and she stayed awake, waiting for him. And he came home and she said it was probably about 2 o'clock. And she was like, oh my gosh, are you okay? What's going on? Just questioning what's happened, whatever. And he was telling her, hey, no big deal. What is it he said? He just got drunk and ended up in his friend's driveway. So, he didn't want to drive. So his friend drove the car to his house. And then Jim just stayed in the driveway in the truck and fell asleep. And Linda was like, didn't question it. She's like, oh, okay, well, I'm glad you're safe. I'm glad there was no accident and you didn't drink and drive and all that. But she said, it didn't make sense. The bar was literally right around the corner from where they lived. Why didn't he just walk home? So she said even though she had a lot of questions, she believed his story and never suspected anything else or that he would be lying to her. However, that same morning, while Jim is still sleeping off his hangover, she gets a phone call. And it's the local police, a detective, asking to speak to Jimmy regarding somebody named Holly. Linda is telling us that she knows Holly. They're good friends. Apparently they went to school together. Linda had done some babysitting for her. I mean, you know, but the detectives are wanting to talk to Jim about Holly, and she's like, why? But Holly was missing. Holly worked at the bar, and her car was still at the bar, but her husband hadn't seen her. And there were reports that people saw her leaving the bar with Jim, so the detectives want to talk to him. So she tells him, she says, you know, he's asleep, but I will tell him to call you when he gets up. You know, what else can she say? So she says she goes in there and she actually wakes him up because the questions just kept bugging her. For one, she is friends with Holly, and they're saying that Jim was the last person they saw her with. So she went and woke him up, and she's telling him that he got the call, and you know, he's playing this whole, well, I don't understand why they would be calling me. Yeah, I saw her last night, but I don't know where she would be, blah, blah, blah. And Linda said, well, I told him you need to call the police and talk to them so they can, you know, try to narrow down where Holly is. She said, of course, he told me he would, and he never did. Never called the police to talk to them about it. So she thought that was odd. You know, it's friends. Holly's not just her friend. Yes, Holly started out originally her friends. They went to school together. But they were all friends. Holly's husband, Linda, Jim, blah, blah, blah. And now Jim's not calling. The detective's back. I think Linda was pretty suspicious a lot of this. Wow, Erin, can you mess up your eyeliner anymore? So, she, you know, I don't know, she was very suspicious, but she didn't put it all together, I guess is a way to say it, because she knew Jim was out late last night and was at that bar, but didn't assume that he could have anything to do with the disappearance. Again, I do get that. I do. So, Jim said, not Jim, Linda said 3 months later, she's looking at the newspaper. This is back when there's still newspapers, right? And there's an article about Holly's disappearance, and she had been found floating in a marsh, in a nearby marsh, obviously dead, strangled to death. And Linda's showing us this actual newspaper. Like, it's right there, black and white. We're looking at it. And it's talking about Holly's death and how Jim is the prime suspect. And Linda is literally looking at this, reading it as we are. And she said her heart was ripped completely out of her chest when she realized that Jim was the prime suspect. She said cops did come by and question both of her and him. Of course, she told him, I wasn't even there. I have no idea what happened that night. So, you know, obviously, she was let go, and nothing was ever questioned. But she had some serious doubts about Jim. And some serious questions. But he was never arrested. They never had any evidence that could link. And this is way before things like DNA and whatnots. So I will say, to this day, Holly's death has never been solved. Okay, back to the story. So Linda then tells us a story of Jim again coming home from the bar at 2 a.m. and how he assaulted her. So he come home and he was drunk, and he pretty much told her they were having sex whether she liked it or not. And, you know, she was telling the story where he come in and they had like one of those little fan window units that stay in the window. He took it out, shut the window, locked everything up, and told her, scream all you want, nobody's going to hear you. And I'm thinking, where's these kids? Why is that every story I tell, I'm like, where are the kids? I don't know. He never tells us. And I still wonder, every story, where are the kids? Anyways, so he proceeds to sexually assault her and choke her until she blacks out. When she woke up, she really has no idea how long she was out. But she knew that if she didn't do something, he was going to end up killing her. And she didn't want to die. She wanted to see her kids grow up. She wanted to see her grandchildren. And I'm like, I wish more people had that kind of self-preservation. I really do. These stories would still be bad. Don't get me wrong. This is not a pleasant story I'm talking about here. But if more people did have more I can't see a whole thing. More self-preservation. I don't know. Anyways, that morning when she got up, she made this elaborate lie because she didn't want him to know what she was doing and try to stop her. Apparently, like, their washer and dryer was on the fritz, so she packed everything up in like laundry bags and told him she was taking the kids with her and she was going to go do laundry. She left him, and she filed for divorce. Good for her. And honestly, in a pretty perfect world, well, in a perfect world, there would be no need for divorce. We marry who we marry, love happily ever after. And yes, my naivety is showing in that because I know that's not how it works. Even if there is no abuse or whatever, sometimes marriages just don't last. I get that. But in a perfect world, she would not have had to have a divorce. She would not have had to run, and I've said had to too many times, but she wouldn't have had to run. However, I would love to say that was the end of Linda's story, and let's get to Terry Joe. But, and I've lost my towel. Sorry, I keep a little hand towel so I can wipe up stuff. But that's not the case. So she tells us a story about a month after the divorce was final. So they are divorced. She has got the 3 kids in the car with her going home wherever they're living at the time. And she turns the corner into this neighborhood, and Jim is standing right in the middle of the road. And she stops. And she rolls down the window to find out what the hell he's doing. I don't know. At this point, I probably would have done this too. I would have been like, what the are you doing? Why are you in the middle of the road? The reenactment show, it was raining. I'd be like, seriously, dude, you got some serious problems. You need to leave me the hell alone. But she pulls over, and he's like, I just need to talk to you, whatever. He's like, scoot over so I can get in. And she's like, do what? So he opens the door and pushes her in, It's a minivan, so she could scoot straight over to the passenger side. And he starts driving. And he's driving them to this like field, said middle of the woods. So she's terrified. She's terrified for her life. She's terrified for the kids that are in the van with them. So he gets to this field and gets out of the car, walks around and drags her out. At this time, this is where I have, like, where was your self-preservation? Because I would have been hitting that lock button or pushing down the button, whatever, sliding my ass back over to the driver's side and shitting and getting out of those woods. She didn't. Might not have even dawned on her to do said. Something like that. He comes and gets her, drags her out, tells the kids to shut up, quit screaming, or he was going to murder their mother. And I say his 2 children are in here, as well as her son, Craig. So then he proceeds to take her to the woods. And hopefully it doesn't state, but I hope it's far enough away. These poor kids did not see this brutal attack on their mother. He takes her shoelaces off her shoes, ties her up with them, sexually assaults her, choking her while he's doing it. She's just knowing she's going to be dead. But she's talking to him the whole time, telling him it's okay. He can leave. She will never tell anybody it happened. What, you say whatever you guys say. And, pardon me, he believed her. So, he let her go. And she took her happy ass straight to the cops. And I'm like, damn straight. So, he never bothered the kids that she told us. There has never been, and honestly, I didn't see anything in these stories about the kids. So they just scared me for nothing, telling me Craig's name. And I'm okay with that. But then it said, so he was arrested, convicted of kidnapping and rape, and sentenced up to 7 years in prison. And at that point, they still didn't have anything on Holly, so he's just in jail for the kidnapping and rape. And then it says that Linda's worst fears came to life 5 years later when she gets a call that he's being released from prison. And, of course, she's terrified. He's going to come after her. He's going to do, finish what he started. You've got to worry about these kind of things. But Jim, shit, he was just like, bye bitches, and skipped his parole, his town, and left. So she was scared. She's looking over her shoulder again. She's looking out her window. She's locking everything up, terrified that he's going to show up, and him's just gone. And I don't know how long it took her before she started feeling any kind of relief or... what is the word I'm looking for? Not relief. Where she wasn't terrified all the time. I don't know how long that was for her. But, yeah, he left. And he ditched probation and headed to Florida, where he sets his sights on another victim. I'm gonna bet it's Terry Joe here. And I'd be right, because now we're hearing from Terry Joe. So she's telling us how she met Jim, or Jimmy as she calls him. And she loves her dates. She knows these dates very well. So she met him February 28th, 1994. She was 36 years old. And I'm thinking February's a month for him. Because if you remember, he met Linda right after Valentine's Day. And now he's met Terry Joe in February. So, I don't know. But she's telling us, and this woman is a character. I mean, I like her. Apparently, she had a rough life before Jimmy, but she was really working to get herself back together. And she tells us a little bit, and I find out a little bit more, which I don't talk about because it didn't have anything to do with the case. But she tells us a little bit. Anyways, she tells us, and I absolutely love this. She met Jimmy on February 28th, 1994, and she testified against him February 28th, 1997. I said, girl knows her dates. She's kind of one of those that you don't want on your bad side. So anyways, she was like, yep, I testified against the bitch. That was me. I did that. So she said that she'd been out shopping and kind of noticed this guy in a very creepy, she doesn't say it like this, I say it like this, but in a very creepy way, was watching her. And eventually he approached her and they got to talking. And she said they got along really well. And he seemed like a regular down-to-earth guy. Now she says that he was a window installer, did some painting, whatever. And she was a little bit of a wild child. You gotta love Terry Jo. You do. And she said that she had had some substance abuse issues in her past. And she was trying to get past that, trying to rebuild her life, and he seemed like a safe distraction. So, she doesn't really state this, but I think they got together pretty quickly. So, the opposite of what I was saying with Linda, where I don't think they got together quickly, these two did. And, she said it was a start of a normal life together. He acted like, they always acted like, he acted like, it was one of those things, that they were going to be together forever. And she said, you know, he even encouraged her to go back to school. And then she says, and I don't really understand why she says this, if it was just a matter of, so she says that actually she was using him. So I don't know if she meant in the whole using him as a distraction as she got sober, if she was using him as for stability, using him to help her get back in school. She doesn't say. She just kind of, you have to see it. You do. She's just like, yep, and I was using him. So Terry Jo, I liked her. I liked her a lot. Linda was more calm. Linda was more responsible. Terry Jo was the wild child. And, but unfortunately now she's in a relationship with Jimmy. And, she says, little did she know that she was, quote, the mouse in the lion's cage, end quote. So, basically, she might have started this with the intention of using him, but it's not necessarily how that went down, is my take on what she said. So anyways, she suspected he had a rough past and was hiding something from her. She actually suspected he had been in jail. And it's funny because she says she had been in jail when she was younger herself. And once you've been in jail, there's just certain ways you do things and how you talk or speak or whatever. And she was noticing that out of him. So, she really thought that he, and you know, had this rough past, and she wanted him to tell her. Like, she was not real happy that he hadn't confided in her and what her past was. And, you know, in what I look back and say, she pressured him to tell her this thing is not spraying good, what his past was. And eventually he did. Or his version of it, I should say. So he told her that he had been in jail he'd been in jail and he was on probation for, and I quote, a small domestic violence incident that was not his fault, end quote. It's never their fault, is it? Ever, ever, ever. So, and he was afraid to tell her because he didn't want her to leave him, being that it was a domestic violence. Fair enough. Excuse me. He told her that his ex-wife didn't like sex and was quite boring when they had sex. She would just lay there. So he was just trying to get a reaction out of her one day and grabbed her by the throat. And she put him in jail for that. And Terry Jo says she'd seen women do this. You know, take something small, make it a huge deal, you know. So she believed him. So she knew his little secret. And she tells us at this point, he starts playing pranks on her. I'm just going to say, anybody play a prank like this on me? So he would, she said, oh, it's going to fall. I'm a mess. I'm sorry. So she says that she always went to bed before him because, frankly, he snored like a freight train. So she would always go to bed before him. And one night, she tells us one night, I don't know if he did this like more than one time, but one night he, my jacket is all bunched up. I should have just took it off. He comes into the bedroom on his belly. Now she's asleep, so I'm really not sure how she knows he exactly does this. But she says he come into the bedroom on his belly, crawling in the room. And I can laugh now because, well, I wasn't there. I would not be laughing if this happened to me. And he gets over to the side of the bed where she's sleeping. And then he reaches up and like he would pinch her or grab her or whatever and wake her up and scare her. You know, and then she's like, yeah, no, this was not cool. And she would tell him, you have got to quit doing this. So I'm thinking he probably did this more than once because she said, you know, it was something he did regularly. But he got such a kick out of it. And he thought it was hilarious. Even though, you know, she was terrified. Or she wasn't terrified. She was scared. I'm going to get to the whole she was terrified story. But, yeah. And she said she had never been in a relationship with a man that didn't like his little games. Again, this is Wild Child Terry Jo talking. She said, but, you know, his games were just kind of creepy. He got a lot of pleasure out of scaring her. And she proceeded to tell this one story. And I'm just going to tell you right now, this would have been enough. My ass would have walked. I don't do well with pranks anyways. I really don't. And this, to me, is not a prank. So, she said one day she'd come home from work. She never really said where she worked, but I know she was still in school and she was working, so good for her. But she come home from work and she decided to take a nice long hot bath. She doesn't say where Jimmy's at. Apparently he's not home at this moment. So she takes this really nice long hot bath. And then she gets out and she's decided she's going to get dressed to look cute for Jimmy. She wants to put something cute on for him. So the reenactment shows her in her towel in her closet. So she said, I go to my closet and I'm looking for something to wear, and all of a sudden somebody jumps out and grabs her. And she said she was terrified. She thought there was a rapist in the house. She, you know, she was terrified. She's fighting for her life. And she said, and this person has her wrapped around and eventually gets her on the floor and has her, like, she's here and the arms around the front, the legs are wrapped, I mean, just completely wrapped. And she's screaming and she's hitting and she's punching. And eventually she hears, it's okay, baby, it's me. So Jimmy decided to hide in her closet, grab her, and jump out and scare the living shit out of her. And, oh God, I would have been so mad. Like, there's nothing on this earth that would have prevented me. Ooh. But anyways, you know, he was just joking. He's kidding. What are you upset about? And she said, I had a few choice words for him. And told him never to do anything like that to her again. But she says, you could tell it turned him on. And it doesn't say this. But I'm thinking it doesn't take much longer for Jimmy's bad side to start showing. Or at least more so. I mean, obviously, in my opinion, his bad side's already shown. You don't just do that to somebody. But, hey. She says, next, that Jimmy liked to role play in sex. And she was never against it. You know, spice it up, whatever. And she said one time, they're getting hot and heavy, and he asked her if he could choke her a little. And I'm thinking, well, hell, at least he asked you. He didn't even ask his, you know, wife when he did it. And she says, in the spirit of, you know, the relationship and keeping things sexy, I thought, why not? We'll try it. Just be gentle. You know, don't be too rough. Be gentle. And she's like, he's like, okay. I mean, very excited about it. And she's like, you know, I'm going to please my man. But I don't think any of us are going to be shocked. I know I wasn't watching the episode. He didn't keep it gentle. She said he got really carried away. Said you can literally see his ecstasy. His eyes were rolling back and he was just enjoying himself. And she's can't breathe. He is choking her to the point where she has to start punching him to get him off of her. And she says she punched him in the head She punched him in the head. It doesn't say. I thought it said how many times she had hit him, but to get him to stop before he finally come to and stopped. And, you know, then he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was just playing and blah, 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 right? He's very apologetic, you know. And she's like, no, that is not okay. I don't like that. We'll never do it again. And he told her, okay. And in a surprise statement, she says, and he never did it again. I'm like, damn, girl, I don't know what you're doing, but his poor wife didn't get that treatment. So, yeah, he is pulling the same kind of stunts and tricks that he pulled with his wife, ex-wife. So then she tells of the story where he starts becoming obsessed with this news article in the paper. Again, you know, this is before internet's, I guess internet might have been a thing, I don't know, but you're still getting a newspaper. And she said it was an article about a serial killer and some women that had been murdered recently. And she reads from the actual article. So, like, she has it right there. She's showing us. And the article talks about women that had been found nude and murdered, left on, you know, various places, just abandoned and dumped. And officials were looking for... Okay, hold on. This article is talking about how one woman had been found murdered and dumped, and how they were linking it to another murder of another woman a month previous. Okay, so, and I'm looking at this paper as she's doing it, and I can see a lot of it. And it looks like a paper in Clearwater, Florida. And the dates are anywhere from May 1995 to October 1995. And the reason I say that is because in the article, it talks about those two, it says two different dates, but I can only see about this much of it. And even though it was blown up, there's a whole lot more to this article that I can't see. So I see those dates, but I don't really know what they correspond to. So Terry Joe is saying that it was making huge news, and everyone was reading about the story in the paper, but Jimmy was obsessed. Like, he'd get up every morning and get the paper. It's the first thing he'd do. And he would read this article to her. I mean, he was just that much into it. And so they did have a suspect, from what I could tell by this article that I was reading. And his last name was Greenfield. I never found anything else about this. So I don't know. But it is mentioned in the article that I'm reading that somebody named Greenfield, that it remains under investigation, that he had just apparently got out of jail. He'd been in jail for murdering a street worker, and it was the first person they were looking at. So that's, you know, I guess that whole story. Now, obviously, back in this day, they were not calling them street workers. That's what I'm calling them. So, so how much more to it? But Jimmy was obsessed and was really just obsessed with how close the cops were to finding the killer. That was his whole thing. And I don't know why I keep going back to bronzer. Anyways, but Jimmy would say things like, oh, these women were just street workers, and they knew what kind of life they were getting, and, you know, the chances they were taking. So he was just really chalking it up to these women. Their life didn't matter because of what they were doing for a living and how they were having to survive. And, you know, that's what they get. It's pretty much what Jimmy was saying. Now, Terry Joe starts to tell us that he was becoming obsessed with cleanliness. Said that when he would wash his hands, he started washing it with alcohol. So, you know, he'd go in and he'd wash his hands. And then after washing it, he would pour alcohol all over it. And I'm like, eesh. You know? And
was very meticulous about cleaning under his nails and everything. She said it became a whole thing. He was just obsessed with staying clean. Okay. And she said, and it kind of carried over to his truck too. And he would be out there every day cleaning up this truck. Just scrubbing it. And not just scrubbing it, but he's washing it with alcohol. I've never heard of such, but he's washing it with alcohol. And she'd be out there helping him. And she said, yeah, I noticed some stains and whatever, but, you know, I didn't question it. And I'm like, but she did question his use of tarps. So apparently he was going through so many tarps. Like, she was just like, they'd always be in the back of his car. He'd get them out and he'd throw them away. And she'd be like, can't you just rinse that off? Why are you throwing them away? And he's like, oh, no. I don't like them dirty. I'm just easier to get rid of them and buy more. And she said, he was buying a lot of tarps. Okay. She said, and I didn't think anything of it to the fact that he needed tarps, because he was, you know, a window installer and a painter, and he'd put them out to collect the debris and the paint and whatever. She said, but I really questioned why he was throwing them away and why couldn't he just use them? And she said, it didn't make a lot of sense to me. She said they would even look like good tarps. And he would throw them away. But it's become my favorite saying. You know, I know, and we know there's more to it than what she's telling us. And it's, you know, it's like I said, it's more or less the fact that she probably didn't know at the time when she's encountering this or retelling the story. So anyways, so Terry Jo tells this story of one night. He gets into bed with her and he's shirtless. And it's kind of like, what, does he wear clothes to bed before? But then she does say that she usually goes to sleep before him. So anyways, he's getting in bed with her and he's shirtless. And she notices that he has scratches all along the sides of his back and neck, all over. And she's like asking him, she's, oh my God, are you okay? What happened? Blah, blah, blah. And he proceeds to tell her this story where he was working on this window and he was underneath a tree, bush, whatever. And it just scratched him. And it scratched him and scratched him and scratched him. And he was fine. It's okay. And she knew he was lying. Like, she knew these were fingernail scratches. And I've got to say, she tells us that she knew something was wrong. And I'm like, yeah, obviously. But what I don't understand is why did I put that over there if I needed it still? Who knows? But why did she get so, like, freaked out about this in the sense that she does? However, I would have been like, oh, you're having an affair on me. I mean, that's where my mind would have gone. And I would think a lot of us would think that too. But she got scared. And she says, and there has to be more than what she's telling us for her to get scared like this. But she tells us that there's times when you could feel evil all around you. In that moment, she felt it. And she knew something was wrong. And I'm like, okay. And she was right, obviously. But is it just me and my trauma? Is it just me that would be like, oh, bitch is cheating on me, we got to deal with this? I don't know. However, it says that she left Jimmy after that. I don't know how long. Whatever. It just says that she left. And I'm like, good. Because then Evil Lives Here tells us that she got out just in the nick of time. Okay. So now she's telling us where, she went back to school. She was still in classes. And one day she's in class, and some detectives come to the school and want to talk to her. And she's like, she sees them and they're homicide. They tell her they're homicide. And, her first question is, who died? Who is it? What's going on? So apparently she thinks something like family or somebody, which she's never mentioned her family. But she's like literally thinking somebody that she knows or is related to her is dead. And I get that. I would have been the same way. And they're like, no. Nothing like that, but we need you to come with us. So she does, and they take her to the local sheriff's office, where they proceed to tell her that Jimmy was responsible for the deaths of the women that had been in the newspaper. She said it was really overwhelming. Like, she was just like, do what? And Jimmy was suspected of killing 4 women. The same ones that he had been like obsessed with keeping up with in the paper. And she said, it's just like someone ripped her heart out. She couldn't believe what was going on. And then she shows us another paper, and the title of this article in the paper says, quote, "Girlfriend says she has no alibi for suspect in prostitute killings," end quote. So basically she couldn't alibi him. I mean, heck, she had I don't know how long all this was going on, if any of them happened after she left. I don't know anything like that. But I did find it, she didn't alibi him, which is good. And she said the things that had started happening in her relationship kind of started coming back to her, as one does when you know the whole story and you start seeing things a little different. But she says the choking, the meticulous cleaning of his body and nails and car, the scratches on his back, everything like that. And she said too, on more than one occasion, he would come home and give her like a piece of jewelry. And he would say he found said jewelry or whatever and would give it to her. She said, looking back at it, they were his trophies. She obviously turned them into the police. But, yeah. So now we're back in Massachusetts with Miss Linda, who says that she heard Jim's name for the first time in 13 years. And she had no idea where he ended up when he disappeared. Like I said, she was just terrified he was going to show up and come and get her. But he was gone. It was yeah. So, she had no idea he was in Florida until she saw the news. So it was making headline news. It was all over. Even in Massachusetts, they were talking about these killings, and in Florida, and they had arrested James for the murders. And she said that she wished he had never gotten out of jail. If they had kept him, it would have all been avoided. But unfortunately, we all know that even going to jail for rape and kidnapping wouldn't have kept him in jail long enough to keep him from doing this, right? So she said that she was taken to Florida to testify against what James had done to her 14 years ago. They were establishing like this pattern. Like, this is what he did to his wife, and so on and so forth, right? Linda says that during the trial, she's seeing these women's family, and it was just devastating. She's literally crying as she's talking about this, because you know, she's there because her ex-husband has murdered or is being on trial for murder, and their families are there. And even though she's not responsible, I mean, to a point, you know, she kind of felt responsible. And she's talking about these families and how these kids of the women, because some of them had kids, now no longer had a mother because of James. She said really witnessing all of that just broke her heart. I mean, for one, she thought she was away from this dude, you know? 14 years. She hasn't seen, heard, or talked about him. And now all of a sudden, she's testifying in his trial. And now we're back to Terry Jo, who shows us a picture of Jimmy in court. And she says he never moved or spoke the whole time he was on trial. So she doesn't even think he looked at anybody but her. And she said, and I quote, "I just gripped my jaw and stared right back," end quote. So the last time she saw him, he was being escorted out of the courthouse in cuffs. He turned and smiled and winked at her. And she says at that point, she knew he probably wished he had killed her. That he's thinking he missed his opportunity. He should have offed her too. So now Evil Lives Here comes up and tells us that James Randall was convicted of murdering Wendy Evans and Cynthia Pugh. If I mispronounced that, I apologize. And showing their pictures. Of course, the pictures that they're showing show 4 women. So there were 4 women they thought he murdered, but he was convicted of killing 2 and said he was given 2 life sentences for those murders. And it was 2 consecutive life sentences. And I'm really hoping it explains about the others too, you know? Because at this point, they made such a big deal about 4 women, he's being convicted of 2. And I didn't know what was going on. Sorry, it's hard to talk and when I've got this thing this close to my eye. Okay. So anyways, Linda is saying that knowing he was in prison for the rest of his life, locked up and unable to hurt anybody, was quite amazing. So, good for her. She said she's lucky she got out of there when she did. She had no doubt he would have killed her. And Terry Jo even stated that she felt Jim missed his opportunity to kill her. So, you know, I don't remember who said this, Terry or Linda, because I said she, and I just mentioned both of them. Anyways, they say it's been 34 years, and that it still affects her and her family. It's not something she could ever get away from. And if you remember when I first started, this is Linda talking. So if you remember when I first started, she said it was the first time that she could talk about this and tell her story. So that's why, because it's been 34 years, but it still affects her and her family. And she's got the kids, right? And she's just determined not to let him ruin her life. She is remarried. She says she's remarried to a wonderful guy. And he treats her and her kids and everybody very well. And she's moved on. And she is not going back. Now, Terry Jo obviously was the one standing in the beach. She's the one from Florida. She was wearing the white and the blue. Very aesthetically pleasing, as I mentioned. And she's there again. And now she's sitting on the beach. And it is just, they did a very good job. She says for all of them, it was a true horror story that they lived in. She said everyone Jimmy touched was touched by evil. And she did not and does not think that 2 life consecutive sentences were enough. She believes that he deserves the death penalty. I mean, she is very much, he deserves to die. And I'm thinking there's a whole lot more to her story she didn't tell us. I mean, she's very, very, very adamant about all that. And then she shows us a picture of Jimmy. And she's she's asking him, is this him today? It's a picture of him in jail. And she says he doesn't look old enough or sick enough for her liking. But he's right where he needs to be. I'm like, okay, I'm loving this woman. I really do. So now, this color might not be what I was hoping for. We're going to look into this a little further like I always do. Let's try that again. Daggone it. All right, give me a second. So if you've seen me do these shows, you know I will Google. Sometimes I fall down this rabbit hole, and sometimes I try to keep it simple. Because basically we are here talking the episode that I just watched. So it's easy to get down a rabbit hole when looking, but I don't always try to, right? So anyways, I Googled James Randall, and the first thing that pops up is his Wikipedia, so we're going to check that first. So James Michael Randall was born August 28th, 1954. It doesn't say where he was born, which I found very weird. Normally they tell you where, but he wasn't. We know he was in Massachusetts with Linda, and we know he ran to Florida and was with Terry Joe. All right, let's get to this. We knew that from the episode. So Randall is currently an inmate in the Charlotte Correctional Institute, serving out 2 life sentences. And there are allegations that Randall was involved in other deaths in Massachusetts and Florida. There was a series of deaths involving female victims, many of them street workers, who were killed by strangulation and their bodies left found naked. The St. Petersburg Times reported that when Randall was informed by detectives he would be charged with the murders of Cynthia and Wendy, he replied, and I quote, "Is that all?" End quote. Now, we go to the cinemaholic.com, which, guys, I don't know why, but I really like that website, especially when looking at these episodes, because it basically talks about the episode with a little bit more in-depth information, which I love. So the article tells us that on October 20th, 1995, a pizza delivery driver found 42-year-old Wendy Evans' body in Oldsmar, Florida. And a few months later, in January 1996, 27-year-old Cynthia's body was found near a warehouse in Palm Harbor, Florida. Now, I didn't look to see how close these places were. It didn't even dawn on me. So, but the similarities between both cases were striking. Wendy and Cynthia were known sex workers, and both were found naked with no jewelry or identification. The cause of death was asphyxiation through manual strangulation for both, and they both had bruises and such on their bodies. So the authorities zeroed in on James Randall. I don't really know when, why, or how, but at the time he had been living with Terry Joe in Palm Harbor. After talking to James, the police saw him leave his truck and tried to make a traffic stop. So apparently they talked to him. I don't understand that, but it says they talked to him and then they saw him leave the truck in the traffic stop. And they tried to stop him. And he led the authorities on a high-speed chase, because that's what you do when you're innocent and just talking to the cops. James was arrested a few days later. Evidence connected James to the murder, and his former partners testified to his penance for choking during sex. So, of course, I wondered about the evidence, what they had that arrested James, that they could arrest James, or what caused them to link it to James. And I'm really not sure I found an answer. I really don't. I think I have a clue, but anyways. It does say that there was hair found on Wendy and Cynthia's body that was consistent to the hair of a dog that lived with James and Terry Joe. So for one, we didn't know he had a dog. And for two, I find that, again, so they can match the dog hairs from Wendy and Cynthia. I get that. How did they know it was James' dog? I don't know. And there was carpet fibers found on the remains that were similar to fibers from a rug in their house. And the tire tread evidence in the area where Wendy was found was consistent to James' truck. He also had a prior kidnapping and sexual battery charge from Massachusetts. Remember, he was arrested for kidnapping and assault on his ex-wife. So I'm thinking that was kind of how he came up, that they started looking at him. They saw this sexual assault. I don't know. So the authorities also suspected that James killed Holly Cote in 1984 in Massachusetts. Now, this is Holly, his Linda's best friend. Her body was found floating in an area James was known to frequent. It was his fishing spot, and she was likely strangled. Friends stated that Holly was seen drinking with a group of friends that included James. However, there was not strong evidence to tie him to Holly's death. And I get that at the time in 1984. The DNA thing was just starting. It was not a popular thing. It wasn't, it isn't what it is today. So did they not have evidence that they can go back and compare it? And I got to wonder this also about the other two women we haven't discussed yet. This day and age, they should be able to do tests to see if he is tied to those other murders, and they haven't. So I have to think that there was something wrong with the evidence, that something happened that they could not do DNA testing. But the most annoying part about it is it's never talked about. They never even mentioned it. So maybe it's just me. I mean, maybe I'm just thinking. But anyways, the authorities also named James the only suspect in the deaths of LaDonna, Jean Steller, and Peggy Darnell in Clearwater, Florida. James was 47 when he went on trial for the murder of Wendy and Cynthia. An expert for the defense stated that James was diagnosed with sexual sadism and had difficulty controlling his urges. However, an expert for the prosecution claimed that James was just playing out his sexual fantasies with Wendy and Cynthia and got carried away. In April of 1997, he was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to death. However, as always, the sentence was later overturned because the court ruled there was not enough evidence to prove the killings were premeditated. So then it was changed to 2 counts of second-degree murder and was handed down the 2 life consecutive sentences. And there were 4 women that were murdered, okay? Apparently 2 of them they could tie to James, obviously Wendy and Cynthia, what he was convicted of killing. However, LaDonna and Peggy were connected to James, but they could not try them for it because they had no physical proof. Nothing that actually tied him to that. And I guess it's just like Holly. They didn't have the evidence. They didn't have whatever. But he was the prime suspect for those 3, Holly, LaDonna, and Peggy. Were never convicted or even tried for them. So there's not a lot of information on Wendy and Cynthia, unfortunately, other than their ages, which I mentioned before. And they were sex workers. And unfortunately, come on, especially back in that day, people really thought they were less than human. So it's awful. However, it states their deaths were very similar to Holly's. So it's going to be a comparison here. I was reading an article on the Tampa Bay Times website, and the first paragraph of the article says, and I quote, "One night in 1978, in a small town in Massachusetts, two women met James M. Randall at the Buttercup Lounge. One woman eventually became Randall's wife, Linda. The other, investigators believe, became his first victim. Murder victim," end quote. So there's a whole lot more to... Linda doesn't tell us that she was actually with Holly when she met James. But that apparently they were really good friends. They went to school together. They were, really, really good friends. Like I said, James and Linda babysat Holly's children for her while she worked at this bar. And, yeah, kind of tragic. So it says, in 1984, Holly's nude body was found floating near a favored fishing hole of Randall. State police named Randall their prime suspect, but they lacked the evidence to charge him. So, another part of the Tampa Bay Times article, and I quote, "Autopsy results and other recently released investigative records from Massachusetts show similarity in the slayings of Miss Cote and the 4 prostitutes," end quote. Sorry, I was quoting. So now I have to mention some similarities between Holly's death and the women in Florida. So Holly was found naked, as were the other 4 women. An autopsy concluded that most likely cause of Miss Cote's death was strangulation. Stella, Evans, and Pugh. So Peggy, Wendy, and Cynthia were all strangled. They believe LaDonna, is that the right name? Yeah, LaDonna was also strangled, but because of decomposition by the time they found her, they couldn't confirm. So Holly's wrists were tied together tightly with a purple sock. At least 3 of the sex workers that were murdered were bound, possibly with duct tape. Investigators could not determine if LaDonna was because of decomposition. Holly had 2 ribs broke. Evans and Darnell had 2 ribs broke, which I need to make sure I get these names right. Wendy Evans, and I believe it was LaDonna Darnell. Maybe it's on this page. No, Peggy Darnell. I apologize. I've been saying that wrong. So, LaDonna, Wendy, and Cynthia were strangled. They thought Peggy was, but she was the one that was had so much decomposition that they couldn't tell if she had the duct tape in the strangulation. So I apologize. I had those names wrong. I should have really checked instead of using last names when I was writing. I was looking at this article and just going straight from there. Okay. So Holly had 2 ribs broken, and Wendy and Peggy had ribs broken. And very similar, obviously, but apparently none of it could actually be tied back to James, other than Cynthia and Wendy. So I'm going to end on that note. There's so much more I could look up because there's so many more questions about, Peggy and LaDonna, and Holly. I will say that in the Tampa Bay News article, Holly's husband is not a fan of James, and literally is pushing, I think even to this day, for James to be prosecuted for Holly's death. I think the best part about it all, when James ran, yeah, he left Linda alone, but he also left those kids alone. And he might not have physically abused them, but mentally, what they witnessed and what they probably heard and saw. So the best part is that when he left, he gave no shits about those kids and left them alone. And hopefully, I didn't look. I will not intrude on their private life, but hopefully they are living a nice, healthy life. The worst part about all of this, Yes, I mean, Linda and Terry Jo suffered. They went through hell living with this psychopath. But there's Holly and LaDonna and Peggy that are still unsolved. And I don't know if it's even still open cases or if they've shut them. I really don't. And it's just really sad. So hopefully, eventually, we'll get some justice for those 3 women. However, we'll leave it at that. And thank you for joining me. What do y'all think? I like it. Like I said, it's one of those makeup roulette things, so I wasn't sure what I was getting into. And I hadn't used that blush and stuff in a while, and it kind of, bam, but there you go. So thank you for joining me. Let me know what you thought of the story. If you have any questions, what you think of the look. And guys, I appreciate you. I love you. Thank you for being there. And until next time, goodbye.